You are looking live at Launch Pad 2 on the Yoshinobu Launch Complex at the Tanegashima Space Center on the southern coast of Japan, where it is early Thursday morning and where the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's H-IIB rocket stands fully fueled, ready to lift off less than 31 minutes from now on a delivery run to the International Space Station. Encased in the launch shroud on the top of the 186-foot-tall rocket is JAXA's unpiloted H-2 transfer vehicle, the HTV-9 cargo craft, also dubbed Kounotori, the Japanese word for white stork. This rocket is ready to begin its journey to the International Space Station to deliver some 4 tons of supplies and science hardware and a half dozen new lithium-ion batteries to be installed on the far starboard truss of the station, the final set of batteries to close out a 3.5-year effort to upgrade the station's power system. More on that in a moment. This is an historic occasion for JAXA, the final launch of an H-2B rocket that made its debut in September 2009 with the launch of the first HTV cargo ship. Today we'll be witnessing the final flight of the current genre of HTV vehicles. JAXA is currently developing a new and improved class of HTV craft called the HTV-X, which will not only carry more cargo than the current HTV, but instead of being captured by the station's robotic arm for installation to the Harmony module, will automatically dock to the complex's international docking adapters. The next generation of HTV cargo craft will be launched on the Japanese Space Agency's new H-3 rocket. The countdown is proceeding without a problem at Tanegashima for a launch at exactly 12:31 p.m. Central Time, which will be 2:31 a.m. Japan time on Thursday. The H-2B rocket employs an instant launch window. At the time of launch, the International Space Station and its 3-man crew will be passing about 256 miles over the South Atlantic off the southern coast of Brazil. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers has been on console for the past several hours, working in concert with their Japanese counterparts in Tanegashima. Here as the flight director for the Orbit 2 team is Marcos Flores. He is joined on console with spacecraft communicator, appropriately, veteran Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, who has been talking directly with the station crew throughout the course of the morning. The Japanese HTV mission is controlled out of 2 different control centers. One is in Tanegashima at the Range Control Center. They're responsible for the countdown and the climb to orbit and the ascent phase for the HTV-9 cargo craft. Once the HTV-9 separates from the second stage of the H-2B rocket and begins the preliminary phase of its trek to the International Space Station, the control of the mission will be handed over to the JAXA ISS Control Center in Tsukuba, Japan. The 2-stage H-2B will be sent aloft with the assistance of 4 solid rocket boosters and liquid fuel engines. The boosters will burn for about 2 minutes and 10 seconds before being jettisoned. The first stage engine will continue to fire until it shuts down at about the 5-minute 46-second mark into the flight. That will be followed seconds later with the ignition of the rocket's second stage engine that will burn for an additional 8 minutes and 15 seconds. All in all, if everything goes as planned, the HTV cargo craft will separate from the second stage just over 15 minutes after launch to begin its 5-day journey to reach the space station. A launch today will result in the HTV-9 arriving at the International Outpost next Monday morning, Memorial Day. Expedition 63 Commander Chris Cassidy of NASA will be in the station's cupola at the robotics workstation at the controls of the Canadian-built Canadarm2 robotic arm. He will be backed up by Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner. Cassidy will maneuver the arm to reach out and grapple the HTV at about 7:15 a.m. Central Time on Monday. At that point, they will turn the robotics work over to ground controllers, who will maneuver the vehicle to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module for its installation and its bolting a few hours later for a 2-month stay at the complex. The H-2B rocket and its HTV cargo ship rolled out of the assembly building at Tanegashima at about 8:30 p.m. Central Time last night, a trip that took about 30 minutes for the vehicle to reach the launch pad, where technicians began to hook up power and fuel lines for the remainder of the countdown. There are two adjacent launch pads at Tanegashima. Launch Pad 2 is the one most commonly used for the launching of the HTV vehicles. Again, the maiden launch of an HTV occurred in September 2009. This is video of the rollout to the Oceanside launch pad last night, U.S. time, early Thursday morning, Japan time. Everything proceeded on track with that 30-minute trek from the assembly building to the launch pad. And again, at that point, technicians began to hook up power lines and fuel lines for the terminal phase of the countdown that is underway, with liftoff now scheduled just under 25 minutes from now. On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 63 crew, under the command of NASA's Chris Cassidy, along with Russian cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner, have been conducting a daily complement of science activity and rehearsals for the arrival of the HTV-9 vehicle next Monday. As we mentioned a moment ago, Cassidy and Wagner will be working the Canadarm2 robotic arm. Cassidy is the prime for the grapple of the HTV cargo ship. He'll be backed up by Wagner, who will assist him and monitor the HTV's systems as it approaches the international post from below, along what is known as the R-bar, or the radial vector, the imaginary line drawn between the International Space Station and the Earth. HTV-9, as other arriving cargo ship commonly do, will inch up that radial vector from beneath the International Space Station to a point about 50 feet away, where Cassidy will reach out with the arm and capture the HTV-9. As we mentioned, the cargo on board the station, some 4 tons of cargo being carried aloft into orbit today aboard the HTV-9 cargo craft, some 4,840 pounds of pressurized cargo in the form of food, supplies, and science hardware for the crew on board the International Space Station, and just over 3,000 pounds of batteries and associated adapter plates for the S6 or starboard 6 truss battery replacement work that will be scheduled several weeks from now. No firm date has been set for the spacewalks to complete the installation of those batteries. The 6 lithium-ion batteries will replace 12 old nickel hydrogen batteries, and that will complete the 4th and final set of battery replacements that will be used to upgrade the station's power system for the remainder of its lifetime. As we approach the T-minus 22-minute mark in the countdown, no issues being worked by the flight control teams. The launch itself to be monitored and controlled by a joint team of JAXA and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries engineers through the HTV's insertion into its preliminary orbit. And as we mentioned, at that point, control of the cargo ship's flight to the International Space Station will be handled by JAXA engineers at their Space Station Control Center in Tsukuba, Japan. One of those engineers is the HTV flight director, Yoshinori Kondo, who will be monitoring a test of a new wireless network system on the HTV during its approach to the station next Monday. This wireless technology demonstration will be verified for the new HTV-X for its automated approach and docking to the station when it flies in the near future. Let's listen to Kondo describe this new piece of technology.
HTV-9 will conduct wired mission. Wired mission is a very technical demonstration mission for HTV-X docking demo. In wired mission, HTV will monitor the ISS and transfer that big data via Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is used for the first time between visiting vehicles. So HTV-9 is the last mission for HTV, but I think HTV-9 is the first step for HTV-X. So I will get a great success for HTV-X.
HTV Flight Director Yoshinori Kondo describing this test of a wireless network system, basically, that will be checked out during the HTV's approach to the International Space Station next Monday, prior to the time that it arrives in close proximity to the station for its capture by NASA's Chris Cassidy using the Canadarm2 robotic arm.
X-20 分.
Even as JAXA prepares now to launch the H-IIB rocket and the final HTV cargo ship to the International Space Station 19.5 minutes from now, preparations well underway in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center for an historic launch, Launch America, coming up 1 week from today as the Demonstration Mission 2, DM2, aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket gets underway with NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken aboard this new Crew Dragon spacecraft. Hurley and Behnken will be flying to the Kennedy Space Center this afternoon for an arrival on the old shuttle landing strip, the shuttle landing facility at the Kennedy Space Center. They'll go into crew quarters for the final week of preparations prior to their launch. There's Doug Hurley, the spacecraft commander, and Bob Behnken, who is the Joint Operations Commander. They will be sitting side by side in the brand new Crew Dragon spacecraft, ready to launch next Wednesday, May 27th, at 3:33 and 31 seconds p.m. Central Time, 4:33 and 31 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, on that historic mission, restoring a launch capability from American soil on an American spacecraft. The crew again preparing to leave their crew quarters here at the Johnson Space Center and to fly down to the Kennedy Space Center later today for their final preparations. Coming up on the 18-minute mark until launch, everything is in good shape aboard the H-IIB, as you see it there on the launch pad. This is launch pad 2 at the Tanegashima Space Center. Liftoff will occur at 12:31 p.m. even Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Japan time on Thursday morning. As we mentioned, there have been a series of milestones and go, no-go decisions that have been made by the Japanese flight control team in Tanegashima throughout the course of the day yesterday and this morning. Milestones that have enabled a green light to be given for the fueling of the H-IIB vehicle and for other preparations to continue in the terminal phase of the countdown. As we mentioned, once the liftoff occurs, solid rocket booster separation, you see at the base of the rocket those 4 solid rocket boosters that augment the first stage engines on the H-IIB rocket. Those solid rockets will separate at about the 2-minute 10-second mark into the flight. The flight uphill on the first stage will continue for several minutes until first stage engine cutoff at about the 5-minute 46-second mark. The first and second stages of the H-IIB rocket will separate just seconds later, prior to second stage engine ignition at the 6-minute 5-second mark into the flight, and at that point about an 8-minute 10-second firing of the singular second stage engine prior to the time of second stage engine cutoff, some 14 minutes and 40 seconds after liftoff. That would be about 25 seconds before the HTV-9 will separate from the upper stage or the second stage of the H-IIB rocket and begin its 5-day journey to the International Space Station. The station is flying at the moment over the South Pacific, about to begin a southwest to northeasterly swing that will take it right up the eastern coast of South America and across the equator to the west coast of Africa on this particular orbit of the Earth. Again, as mentioned, at the time of launch, which is an instant launch time of 12:31 p.m. Central Time, 1:31 p.m. Eastern Time, the International Space Station with Cassidy, Ivanishин, and Wagner on board will be passing about 256 miles over the South Atlantic off the southern coast of Brazil.
X-15 分。
As we pass the T-minus 14-minute mark into the flight, just a reminder once again regarding the historic launch a week from today of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Kennedy Space Center. Once that launch occurs next Wednesday, it'll be about a 19-hour transit for Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken to reach the International Space Station, with docking scheduled on Thursday, May 28th at 10:39 a.m. Central Time, 11:39 a.m. Eastern Time. The Crew Dragon spacecraft will dock automatically to International Docking Adapter number 2 on the forward port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. So a busy traffic pattern emerging for the crew on board the station. Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishин, and Ivan Wagner, who have been in orbit now for 6 weeks, about to receive company, first in the form of a cargo ship and then additional crew members. T-minus 12 minutes, 30 seconds until liftoff. Everything proceeding on track, no issues reported, and the range is clear at Tanegashima.
H-IIB ロケット9号機
打ち上げ最終実施判断の結果を連絡します。
This is our final go or no-go decision.
現在各系ともロケット打ち上げの最終作業を実施中です。
And as launch controllers in Tanegashima count down the final 10.5 minutes until liftoff, this view from an external camera on the International Space Station as it approaches the southern coast of Chile, about to begin its southwest to northeasterly trajectory that will take the International Space Station up the eastern coast of South America.
日本時間の午前2時31分00秒に実施します。
Consequently, we are launching the H-IIB launch vehicle number 9, carrying the HTV-9 named Kounotori 9 at 2:31:00 a.m. Japan Standard Time.
打ち上げ10分前になりました。種子島宇宙センター高崎総合司令塔から H-IIB ロケット9号機の打ち上げ状況。
You are hearing conversation both in Japanese and English from Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency personnel in Tanegashima reporting the status of the countdown. Everything is go for launch, now inside 9.5 minutes.
現在のところすべて順調との報告を受けています。
Our launch site operators have given reports that the final checks are underway. All is looking good.
H-IIB ロケット9号機は本日ターミナルカウントダウン作業を開始し、現在はその最終段階にあります。
The terminal countdown operations for the H-IIB Flight 9 started, and we are now in the final stage of the terminal countdown operations.
打ち上げ8分前より打ち上げに向けた秒読みが開始されます。
We will start the terminal countdown at T-8 minutes.
打ち上げ8分前です。打ち上げに向けた秒読みが開始されました。
It's 8 minutes to launch. We have initiated the final countdown.
種子島宇宙センター高崎総合司令塔から H-IIB ロケット9号機の打ち上げ状況をお伝えしております。
We are reporting the H-IIB number 9 launch live from the Takasaki Launch Control Center.
7.5 minutes until launch, everything proceeding on track for the liftoff of the H-2B rocket at 12:31 p.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Japan time on Thursday from the Yoshinobu Launch Complex at the Tanegashima Launch Center in southern Japan. Everything has gone extremely well with the preparation of this vehicle that will carry, amongst other things, the final set of new lithium-ion batteries for the upgrades to the International Space Station's power system, an endeavor that began in January of 2017 and which will be completed in the months ahead to upgrade the station's power systems for its solar arrays and all of its various systems and payloads. This view, a closer view of the H-2B rocket. You see the vehicle bathed in blue light. This in honor of healthcare workers fighting on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in honor of all of the workers at the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan who have worked through the pandemic to prepare the vehicle for launch. So a tribute from JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, responsible for the launch vehicle. This blue light bathing the H-2B rocket in honor of healthcare workers fighting on the front lines of the current coronavirus pandemic.
Japan Standard Time.
310、309、308、307。
T-minus 5 minutes and counting. No issues reported. The vehicle fully fueled, ready to begin its flight.
衛星系準備完了。
The satellite systems are go.
290、89、88、87、86、88、89、85、84、83、82、81、280、79、78、77、76、75、74、73、72、71、
自動カウントダウンシーケンス開始。
Automatic countdown sequence has been initiated.
種子島宇宙センター竹崎総合司令塔から H-IIB ロケット9号機の打ち上げ状況をお伝えしております。
This is a live launch feed of the 9th H-2B launch vehicle from the Takasaki Range Control Center, the JAXA Tanegashima Space Center.
現在ロケットの管制は吉野部発射管制塔から行われています。
The Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency personnel in Tanegashima reporting launch status. Everything is green as we approach the 3.5-minute mark until flight.
220、 210、209、208、207、206、205、204、203、202、201、200、99、98、97、96、95、94、93、92、91、190、89、88、87、86、85、84、83、82、81、180、
打ち上げ3分前です。
Running through the checklist at the 2-minute 48-second mark until liftoff. Everything continues to proceed on track. Again, this is about a 15.5-minute flight from liftoff until the time that the HTV-9 spacecraft separates from the second stage of the H-2B rocket. A good close-up view of the three of the four solid rocket boosters that surround the first stage of the H-2B, the launch vehicle managed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries.
140、39、38、37、36、35、34、33、32、31、130、29、28、
T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
26、25、24、23、22、21、120、19、18、17、16、15、14。
Launch pad floodlights creating a luminescent effect on the H-2B rocket as it prepares to begin its journey to send the final H-2B cargo craft to the International Space Station.
1段液体酸素系準備完了。
Visualization complete of the liquid oxygen system of the first stage.
90 seconds until launch.
2段液体酸素系液体水素系準備完了。
Followed by the pressurization of liquid oxygen and hydrogen system of the second stage, and they are now complete.
76、75、74、73、72、71、70、69、60。
セレクター冷却開始。
1 minute until launch. Everything in good shape. T-minus 44 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 14 seconds and counting, standing by for engine ignition.
The flight mode on.
We have engine start.
Activating the thermal batteries.
電システム準備完了。
All systems are go.
メインエンジンスタート。
We have main ignition.
And we have liftoff. A rising sun over the land of the rising sun as JAXA's H-IIB rocket and the HTV-9 cargo craft take flight.
9号機は2020年5月21日午前2時31分00秒に
Roll, pitch, and yaw program in effect. The H-IIB rocket takes flight to the International Space Station.
Space Center at 2:31:00 a.m.
Liftoff occurring right on the dot at 12:31 p.m. even Central Time, 2:31 a.m.
打
Japan
ち上げ以
time.
降ロケットの完成は
44 seconds into the flight.
竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれ
Just passing 1 minute into the flight, everything continuing to look good.
ロケットは正常に飛行中であり、種子島の地上局は正常にロケットの追尾を行っています。
The H-IIB flight is
4 solid rocket boosters, 2 liquid fuel engines propelling the HTV-9 towards its preliminary orbit, coming up on the 1 minute 30 second mark into the flight. Coming up on the 2 minute mark into the flight, coming up on solid rocket booster shutdown and separation.
SLBX has burned out.
（SRBA 第一
And we have solid rocket booster jettison.
Of the first and second pairs of SLBs.
2.5 minutes into the flight. First stage engines are continuing to fire, as they will until about the 5 minute 46 second mark into the flight, at which point those engines will shut down. The first stage will separate.
–
3 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight, everything proceeding normally. The first stage continues to burn in excellent shape. All good reports coming in from the Range Control Center at Tanegashima.
The first stage engine, attitude control, and trajectory are all normal. The H-IIB flight is on hold. Current altitude is about 93 kilometers. Velocity is approximately 1.9 kilometers per second.
Coming up on the 4 minute mark into the flight. About 2 minutes to go in first stage performance. The H-IIB rocket is operating in normal fashion. 4.5 minutes into the flight, which has been flawless so far. Everything proceeding well. Good first stage performance. The solid rocket boosters that separated just over 2 minutes into the flight did their job in augmenting the dual first stage engines on the H-IIB rocket. This is the final flight of the H-IIB, to be replaced with the new H-3 rocket that JAXA will be employing for its new genre of cargo craft called the HTV-X, that is scheduled to launch about 2 years from now. 5 minutes, 5 seconds into the flight.
It's 5 minutes after liftoff.
ロケットは順調に飛行を続けており、現在の高度は約 155km、秒速約 4km です。
The combustion of the first stage engine, attitude control, and trajectory are all normal. The H-IIB flight is on course. Current altitude is about 155 km. Velocity is approximately 4.0 km per second.
Five minutes, 56 seconds into the flight.
The first stage engine cut off.
第1弾、第2弾ロケット分離。
Separation of the first and second stages.
And now we have confirmation of separation of the first and second stages. This is animation driven by real-time telemetry from the Range Control Center at Tanegashima. The second stage is now up and running. The single engine on the second stage is firing and will continue to do so for about 8.5 minutes, almost 9 minutes of performance. The second stage ignition occurred on time. The trajectory of the vehicle is reported to be perfect. Second stage engine cutoff will come at about the 14.5 minute mark into the flight. Coming up on the 8-minute mark into the flight, which so far has been flawless. The second stage engine continues to burn in a nominal fashion to continue propelling the HTV-9 cargo craft towards its preliminary orbit. As the HTV-9 lifted off from Tanegashima, there were kanpai, as they say in Japanese, cheers in the Launch Control Center, marking the start of the final flight of the H-IIB rocket and the final flight of this class of HTV cargo craft that made its debut in September of 2009. Passing the 8.5 minute mark into the flight, as you can see from this telemetry-driven animation provided by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the trajectory is on the money. For the second stage performance continues to be good from the reports being received from the Range Control Center at Tanegashima. Launch engineers continue to report nominal performance for the H-IIB rocket. Now passing the 9.5-minute mark into the flight. Again, the highlight component of the cargo being carried to the International Space Station, the final half-dozen brand new lithium-ion batteries and associated adapter plates that will be installed on the far starboard truss of the International Space Station, the S6 truss. A series of EVAs or spacewalks are being considered for potting into the crew's timeline later on this summer. EVA preparations are being conducted, and the space station program will make a final determination on how those EVAs will be dispositioned in the weeks to come. Again, the battery replacement work began in January of 2017 on the truss segments of the International Space Station to provide the final upgrades for the station's power system for the remainder of its lifetime. "11 minutes into the flight, we have about 4 minutes and change of second stage performance left for the H-IIB rocket. The velocity of the H-IIB rocket is matching all of the pre-launch parameters. Good second stage performance. Good vehicle control as we are coming up on the 12-minute mark into the flight. Once again, from the animation that you're looking at provided by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the vehicle traveling some 6,700 meters per second. Good reports continue to come in from the Range Control Center at Tanegashima, where liftoff occurred 12 minutes and 45 seconds ago. Telemetry from the H-IIB rocket and the HTV-9 cargo ship being processed through a series of ground stations being employed by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency on the trajectory of its flight. We're about 2 minutes away from the completion of second stage performance. "14 minutes into the flight, everything continuing to go well. Good vehicle control being reported. Good engine performance on the second stage. Meanwhile, the International Space Station has crossed the west coast of Africa moving from southwest to northeast. And we have a report of second stage shutdown on time. We'll be standing by for spacecraft separation moments from now. "15 minutes into the flight, standing by for spacecraft separation." And this view now from the Range Control Center at Tanegashima. Applause as we have confirmation of spacecraft separation. The HTV-9 now in its preliminary orbit. A flawless launch and a flawless climb to orbit for the final HTV vehicle, now well on its way to the International Space Station. This is Mission Control Houston, back here in the white flight control room where the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers monitored the successful launch of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's H-IIB rocket and the final H-2 transfer vehicle, the HTV-9. On console, Flight Director Marcos Flores and spacecraft communicator Aki Hoshide, veteran Japanese astronaut, as we monitored the progress of the vehicle's climb to orbit and the spacecraft separation that delivered the HTV-9 vehicle into its preliminary orbit as it begins its 5-day chase to catch up to and arrive at the International Space Station. Once again, to recap, a flawless countdown. Everything proceeded without a hitch. Liftoff occurring right on time at 12:31 p.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Japan time on Thursday. The H-2B rocket lit up, illuminating the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan as it began its climb out, arcing out to the northeast in pursuit of the International Space Station. The first stage performance with 2 liquid fuel engines and 4 solid rocket boosters went as advertised, followed by the singular power of the second stage engine that carried the HTV-9 to its preliminary orbit, where it now begins its journey to the international outpost to deliver some 4 tons of cargo, as well as the new set of lithium-ion batteries to complete the power upgrades to the station's power system. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage with a programming note. The HTV-9 will arrive at the International Space Station next Monday, Memorial Day. Our rendezvous and capture coverage will begin at 5:45 a.m. Central Time, 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Capture with NASA's Chris Cassidy operating the Canadarm2 robotic arm is scheduled at 7:15 a.m. Central, 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll take a break at that point as Cassidy turns over control of the robotics to ground controllers here in Houston, who will maneuver the HTV-9 to the nadir or Earth-facing port of the Harmony module for its installation and bolting into place, with that coverage beginning at 8:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for today. A successful launch of the HTV-9 on time, being delivered to orbit by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency for its final flight to the International Space Station. With that, we wish you a good day. Please stay safe and follow all the rules associated with conquering this coronavirus pandemic. And we'll see you back on Monday morning with HTV-9 capture coverage here on NASA television. For now, this is Mission Control Houston.